Hi, I'm Tim Morris. I'm with my colleague Jarvis DeBerry, Times-Picayune, NOLA.com, and on Common Ground we take opportunities to kind of talk about things and see if we can come to a civil discussion. So the ongoing controversy about the NFL players protesting during the national anthem became another issue Sunday when Dallas Cowboys owner Jerry Jones announced that any player who disrespected the flag, which meant kneeling during the national anthem, would not play for his team. And some people went on Twitter and said, so this is now a chance to see whether some of those Cowboy stars show up and stand up to the owner. And ESPN commentator Jemele Hill said, no, let's don't put pressure on the players. If you really want to have an impact, put it on the team, the franchise, which include maybe not buying products, merchandise associated with them, and maybe boycotting some of the advertisers.
Yeah.
So ESPN has suspended her for 2 weeks, and I'm kind of guessing based on what you wrote, that do you think that's unfair? And I wanted to find out, why do you think that's unfair?
Yeah, I think it was unfair of ESPN to, number one, link this tweet to what she said previously about Trump. And I got their statement here. It says she's been suspended for 2 weeks for a second violation of our social media guidelines. She previously acknowledged letting her colleagues and company down with an impulsive tweet. And I don't really think that either of those tweets was impulsive. I think both tweets reflected her deeply held opinions about the issues that were being discussed. And ESPN brought her on to express her opinion. She was a sports columnist for the Orlando Sentinel. She was hired for the network's debate shows. This is obviously the debate that people are having across the country in the sports world. And she expressed an opinion that I think is valid, that it should not be just, people would be hypocritical to say, oh, those players better stand up to the owner as I continue to watch the games and buy all the owner's merchandise. And so I think it was a valid opinion, and I don't understand how that's a violation of the social media guidelines. It implies, by calling it a social media violation, that if she had said it on the air, they would be more okay with it, which I don't believe.
Right. So going back, and they did make a point, I think, of saying it was her second. She had, a couple of weeks ago, and the first tweet said that President Donald Trump was a white supremacist
who has surrounded himself with other white supremacists.
Which they didn't really punish her for. I mean, she got called out, and they did say she had abused their policy, and she apologized and seemed to say, yeah, I agree. I shouldn't have said that.
On Twitter.
On Twitter, right. The whole exchange has been on Twitter. So, and she later wrote saying that basically she did understand she had put her employer in a bad position.
Yeah.
So I think that was something that I would have seen much more likely to be punished. And so I am a little also kind of confused about why the second one, because it was not impulsive. Correct. And actually I thought she had a really good thought, except I want to say that, and this is a journalist thing, that ESPN has great journalists, I think do great journalism, but they're also in this very odd situation in which they're paying the NFL, $2 billion a year to air games, and so they have a vested interest in the NFL succeeding. Yeah. So what she said was counter to the company's bottom line. So I'm not saying it's noble, but I'm saying in that case they had a right to say, look, you're hurting us, and therefore we're going to take action.
And I think that's what they should have said in their statement. They could have very easily said, she's messing with our money here, and we don't like this, and we need you to stop. But to call it a social media violation, I think if you are somebody who's been hired to express opinions, the last thing you need to be thinking about is how advertisers are going to respond to that. Because if that's in your head, then that is a damper on any. It weakens the integrity of anything that you might say or do.
And I think that's true for who we work for, and newspapers and news organizations in general, the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, Wall Street Journal, all of that, you would say we're not going to kowtow. But again, I think the ESPN has put itself in such a position with the NFL that they're too closely aligned. And I think if I go to work for ESPN, I kind of recognize that.
Yeah, but also if ESPN hires people to express their opinions, are they going to say, okay, this is an opinion that you cannot express, that you cannot speak on the boycott? Because if she cannot talk about the thing that everybody is talking about, except in some narrow and prescribed way, then I don't know that ESPN can talk about this topic at all. And that's an abdication of their responsibility as the sports leader, which they claim to be.
Right. But again, I think that they are so entwined with the NFL. That again, I agree with you. They should have been honest and said, look, what she said is kind of counter. Now, I don't know that people who work for ESPN sign contracts, and I don't know what all it says within those contracts, and I don't know who interprets and what ways of appeal. I haven't seen anything that she said so far to say that she disagrees with this. And one of the things we don't know also is whether she's been suspended with pay or without pay. And
I don't know that.
I've worked my whole life to figure out how to get suspended with pay. So I find that.
Let me know how that turns out for you.
But the other part of this, though, is that people are saying that her freedom of speech is being infringed upon. And I would also say that that's the argument now about the players. And I would also say that one of my criticisms of how this protest has happened is that we are now arguing, or the protest is now about whether they have a right to protest, as opposed to the original about, you know, racial inequities, police brutality, oppression. But now we're going to talk about whether the players have a right to stand or kneel during the national anthem.
Yeah, we're in agreement, I think, that it's not a First Amendment issue because this is not the government. Well, with the exception of the White House saying that she ought to be fired. You know, that would be a violation of her First Amendment rights, I think. But no, this is to me an example of, you know, how much latitude, how much freedom does a person hired to express opinions actually have? And to me, that is the issue here. You know, you brought her on because of her outspokenness, and now it's her outspokenness that has you in a swivel.
And you know, and that happens. So again, so I think the ESPN has a right to decide its standards and to have disagreements over that. You know, whether this was a violation, you know, based on when they talked to her the last time, a few weeks ago, what her contract says. Now, they said over and over, we repeated what our standards are, what they call, I think, public facing, which means it means Twitter and Facebook and anything else beyond what you're doing on
And my question
TV.
would be, if she had had the opposite view, if she had had the view that nobody should boycott anything or protest anybody, would ESPN be upset with that? And I think the answer is no. So the issue to me isn't that she voiced an opinion on this particular topic. I think it's the specific opinion that she did address, and that is what gives me a chill as somebody who writes opinions for a living.
Right. That
it is not the fact that she entered into this debate, because I don't think they would have had a problem with it at all if she had taken the opposite point of view. It's a fact that they said something that could have an adverse impact on the people that they do business with.
Right. See, this is one of these moments when we're having these conversations. We realize there's a lot that we agree on.
Yeah.
You know, that it's not First Amendment, that the ESPN could do what it's doing, although we can question whether they were journalistically sound in doing it, and whether they were transparent enough, and when they explain why they're doing it. And I don't think they have been.
Yeah, there's a lot of common ground there, but still a lot of disagreement, I think.
So we've succeeded once again in coming to common ground without having to agree completely, but I've learned some things, and I hope you've learned some things, that we have a better understanding, and I hope that you'll join us the next time for Common Ground.